The Grand Hall of the Galactic Military Academy stretched wide enough to fit 3 cargo ships side by side. Hundreds of cadets stood in perfect rows, their uniforms representing dozens of worlds across the known galaxy. The air buzzed with nervous energy and the low hum of translation devices working overtime to keep everyone connected. Derek Foster stood near the middle of the formation, trying to keep his breathing steady. His human frame looked small compared to the towering Kralix warriors beside him, their thick armor-plated skin gleaming under the bright lights. On his other side, a group of Valonian cadets whispered among themselves, their silver eyes reflecting an excitement Derek wished he could share. Today was the bonding ceremony. The day every cadet had been waiting for since they first arrived at the academy. Today they would meet their warbeast. Commander Ninetal stepped forward onto the raised platform. The alien officer's 4 arms gestured broadly as he spoke, his voice carrying across the massive space without need for amplification. Cadets of the academy, today you take the next step in your journey. The warbeasts you will meet have been bred and trained across multiple worlds. They are intelligent, powerful, and loyal. But they are also selective. Derek felt his stomach tighten. He had heard the stories. Some cadets never bonded with a warbeast. Some went through the entire ceremony and walked away alone, their military careers effectively over before they truly began. The beasts will inspect you, Commander Ninetal continued. They will choose based on instinct, on compatibility, on something we cannot measure or predict. Do not be discouraged if you are not chosen immediately. Some bonds take time. A massive door at the far end of the hall began to open. The sound of heavy breathing and clicking claws echoed through the space. Derek could see movement in the shadows beyond the doorway. The first warbeast emerged into the light. It was a thorncrawler, its body covered in natural armor plates that shifted and moved like living metal. The creature walked on 6 powerful legs, each step deliberate and measured. Its eyes scanned the crowd of cadets with clear intelligence. More beasts followed. Skyrunners with sleek bodies built for speed and flight. Grimjaws with massive heads and teeth designed to tear through reinforced hull plating. Shadewalkers that seemed to flicker in and out of visibility as they moved. Each one was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Then the whisper started. Is that Fenrik? The Alpha? I thought he was banned from the program. He's huge. Derek looked toward the doorway and understood the reaction immediately. The warbeast that emerged now made all the others look small. Fenrik stood nearly 4 meters tall at the shoulder, his body a mix of muscle and thick fur that ranged from deep black to silver. His eyes glowed with a pale amber light, and when he breathed, Derek could see vapor rising from his nostrils even in the warm hall. Fenrik was a legend among the cadets. An alpha warbeast from a bloodline that produced one viable alpha every dozen generations. Aggressive, intelligent, and utterly unwilling to follow standard training protocols. 3 different handlers had tried to work with him. All 3 had quit. The other warbeasts began their inspections, moving through the rows of cadets with purpose. Derek watched as a thorncrawler stopped before a Kralix cadet, both seeming to recognize something in each other. The bond was immediate and clear. Around the hall, similar connections were forming. But Fenrik moved differently. The massive alpha walked slowly down the first row of cadets, his nose barely an inch from each one. He would pause, sniff deeply, then move on. No interest. No connection. A Valonian cadet named Ishera stood straighter as Fenrik approached her. She was top of the class in tactics and had made no secret of her desire to bond with an alpha. Fenrik stopped before her, his massive head level with her chest. He breathed in her scent once, twice. Then he moved on. Ishera's silver eyes went wide with shock and disappointment. Fenrik continued his methodical inspection. Row after row. Cadet after cadet. Each one was examined and dismissed. The hall grew quieter as everyone began to realize what was happening. The legendary alpha was rejecting everyone. Derek tried to focus on the other warbeasts still moving through the crowd, hoping one of them might stop for him. But his eyes kept drifting back to Fenrik. The alpha had finished the 3rd row and was starting on the 4th. Derek's row. The warbeast's movements were precise and unhurried. He ignored the nervous excitement radiating from the cadets around him. A Grimjaw had bonded with the cadet 3 spots to Derek's left, their connection sparking a small cheer from nearby observers. But Fenrik seemed completely unaware of anything except his systematic search. Then the alpha was directly in front of Derek. Time seemed to slow. Fenrik's amber eyes locked onto Derek's face with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. The warbeast lowered his massive head, bringing his nose close to Derek's chest. The sound of his breathing filled Derek's ears, drowning out everything else. Fenrik circled to Derek's left side, still sniffing. Then to his right. Then behind him. Derek stood frozen, unsure if he should move or speak or do anything at all. The beast's warm breath washed over him in waves. Fenrik completed his circle and came back to stand directly in front of Derek. For a long moment nothing happened. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Then Fenrik sat. The movement was deliberate and final. The massive war beast lowered his haunches to the floor, his front legs straight, his eyes never leaving Derek's face. It was a posture Derek recognized from old Earth images of wolves and dogs. A posture of attention and decision. Impossible, someone whispered. Commander Ninetal was moving through the crowd now, his forearms gesturing for space. Other trainers followed, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright disbelief. Cadet Foster, the commander said, his voice carefully neutral. Step forward. Derek took a shaky step toward Fenrik. The war beast remained perfectly still. Place your hand on his head, Commander Ninetal instructed. Derek raised his hand slowly, aware that hundreds of eyes were watching. His palm made contact with Fenrik's fur. It was surprisingly soft beneath the coarse outer layer, warm with living heat. Fenrik leaned forward, pressing his massive head firmly against Derek's chest. A low rumble came from deep in the beast's throat. Not a growl. Something else. Something that sounded almost like contentment. Well, Commander Ninetal said quietly. It appears the Alpha has chosen. Around the hall, the whispers started again. Derek could hear the disbelief, the jealousy, the confusion. A human had been chosen by Fenrik. An Alpha had bonded when everyone said it was impossible. Derek looked down at the war beast still pressed against him and felt something shift in his chest. This was real. This was happening. And somehow he knew his life had just changed forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the academy training grounds as Derek approached the containment area. 3 days had passed since the bonding ceremony, and he still felt the weight of every stare that followed him through the hallways. The human who bonded with the Alpha. The impossible pairing that nobody believed would work. Fenrik waited in a reinforced enclosure designed to hold creatures twice his size. The war beast paced back and forth, his massive form moving with restless energy. When he saw Derek approaching, he stopped and sat just as he had during the ceremony. Good morning, Derek said softly, keying in his access code. The door slid open with a hiss. Training Officer Brell stood nearby, his thick Kralix arms crossed over his chest. You have 2 hours, Cadet Foster. Make them count. Commander Ninetal wants to see progress, or this experiment ends. Derek nodded and stepped inside. The door sealed behind him with a sound that felt too final. For the first hour, Derek tried everything he had learned in his training classes. Standard commands. Hand signals. The reward systems that worked with every other war beast in the academy. Fenrik watched each attempt with those glowing amber eyes, but he did not move. Did not respond. Did not obey. Fenrik, advance, Derek commanded, using the proper tone and gesture. The war beast tilted his head slightly. Then he yawned, showing teeth the size of Derek's fingers. Derek felt frustration building in his chest. He had studied the manual all night. He knew the protocols. Why would Fenrik not cooperate? By the second day, word had spread about Derek's struggles. Other cadets gathered near the training area to watch, their whispers carrying across the open space. Derek could see Era among them, her silver eyes watching with barely concealed satisfaction. The Alpha made a mistake, he heard her tell another cadet. Humans do not understand war beasts. This will end badly. Derek tried to ignore the comments. He focused on Fenrik, attempting a new series of commands. The war beast remained unresponsive, though Derek noticed something interesting. Whenever Derek showed frustration or raised his voice, Fenrik would move away. But when Derek spoke calmly, the beast would lean closer. On the third day, Commander Ninetal himself came to observe. The four-armed officer stood silent at the edge of the training ground, his expression unreadable. Derek felt the pressure like a physical weight. This was his chance. Maybe his last chance. He took a deep breath and began the command sequence again. Fenrik, stand ready. Nothing. Fenrik, defensive position. The war beast simply stared at him. Derek felt something break inside him. Not anger. Something deeper. He had tried everything the academy taught him. Every technique. Every method. And none of it worked. Maybe Ashera was right. Maybe this was a mistake. He sat down on the ground, his back against the enclosure wall. If this was going to fail, he might as well be comfortable while it happened. Fenrik's ears perked up. The massive war beast took a step forward, then another. He approached Derek slowly, cautiously, and then did something unexpected. He lay down beside Derek, his huge head resting near Derek's leg. Derek blinked in surprise. He reached out hesitantly and placed his hand on Fenrik's head, just as he had during the bonding ceremony. The war beast made that same rumbling sound, deep and content. "You do not want a commander, do you?" Derek said quietly, more to himself than to Fenrik. "You want something else." A memory surfaced from Derek's childhood. His family's colony world had been remote and harsh. They kept working animals, descendants of earth dogs bred for herding and protection. His father had taught him something important about those animals. They did not follow orders because they feared punishment. They cooperated because they were part of the family. Part of the pack. "You want a pack," Derek whispered. Fenrik lifted his head and looked directly into Derek's eyes. For the first time, Derek saw something other than defiance there. He saw recognition. Derek stood up slowly. Fenrik rose with him, moving in perfect sync. Derek started walking toward the center of the training ground. He did not command. He did not order. He simply walked, and Fenrik walked beside him, matching his pace exactly. They reached the center and Derek stopped. Fenrik stopped. Derek turned left. Fenrik turned left. It was not obedience. It was coordination. Partnership. "Interesting," Commander Ninetal said from the edge of the grounds. Derek's heart pounded. He needed to show more. He needed to prove this could work. He looked at the obstacle course set up across the training area. Standard drill. War beasts were supposed to navigate it on command while their partners directed from a safe distance. But that was not how packs worked. Derek started running toward the first obstacle, a series of raised platforms. Fenrik surged forward with him, his powerful legs eating up the distance. Derek jumped to the first platform. Fenrik leaped to the one beside it. They moved together, neither leading, neither following, just moving as one unit. The next obstacle was a narrow beam suspended 2 meters off the ground. Derek ran across it, his arms out for balance. Fenrik could not fit on the beam, but he paced below it, keeping exact pace with Derek's movements above. A wall came next, too high for Derek to climb alone. He did not need to give a command. Fenrik moved into position without being asked, lowering his shoulder. Derek used the war beast as a stepping point, vaulting over the wall. On the other side, Fenrik simply jumped the obstacle, clearing it with ease. They finished the course in half the standard time. Derek was breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face. Fenrik stood beside him, barely winded, his tail moving in what Derek was learning to recognize as satisfaction. Commander Ninetal approached with Training Officer Brell. Both officers looked stunned. "That was not protocol," Brell said. "No," Commander Ninetal agreed. "It was better." He turned to Derek. "You have done what 3 trained handlers could not, Cadet Foster. You have found a way to work with Fenrik. But I must warn you, the real tests are still ahead. Other cadets train with precision and discipline. Your method is unusual. Unproven." Derek nodded, still catching his breath. "I understand, sir. Do you?" The commander's expression grew serious. "Fenrik has a reputation for a reason. He is aggressive in combat situations. Protective to a fault. If he perceives a threat to you, he will not follow any protocol. That could get other cadets hurt during training exercises. Then I will make sure he knows I can protect myself," Derek said. "That is how packs work. Everyone has a role. Everyone contributes." Fenrik pressed against Derek's side, and Derek felt that rumble of contentment again. For the first time since the bonding ceremony, Derek allowed himself to smile. This might work after all. The simulation chamber hummed with energy as Derek and his assigned squad took their positions. 5 cadets total, each paired with their war beast, facing a tactical scenario designed to test coordination and strategy. Derek checked his equipment one final time while Fenrik stood close beside him, eyes scanning the darkness ahead. "Remember the objective?" Squad leader Torvix announced through the communication device. The tall Kralix cadet had made it clear he was not happy having Derek and Fenrik on his team. "We move together, we strike together, we hold formation. No independent action." The simulation began. Holographic enemies appeared in the distance, moving through a recreated urban environment. The squad advanced in standard formation, war beasts flanking their partners, weapons ready. Everything went smoothly for the first 10 minutes. They cleared 2 buildings, neutralized simulated targets, and maintained perfect communication. Derek started to think maybe this would work after all. Then the simulation changed. Enemy fire erupted from a rooftop, bright orange pulses that would register as hits on their sensors. The blasts were aimed directly at Derek's position. Fenrik reacted instantly. The massive war beast lunged forward, placing his body between Derek and the incoming fire. His armored hide absorbed the simulated impacts while he pushed Derek backward with his shoulder. "Fenrik, hold position," Derek shouted, but the war beast ignored him. Protection instinct had taken over. The formation collapsed. Torvix and his Thorncrawler were forced to adjust their angle. Ihara had to pull back to avoid Fenrik's massive form blocking her line of fire. The entire squad scattered, and the simulation enemies capitalized on the chaos. Red lights flashed across everyone's sensors. Mission failed. The simulation powered down. In the sudden silence, Derek could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Fenrik stood over him, still in protective stance, not understanding what he had done wrong. Torvix's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "Unacceptable. Your beast cannot be controlled, human. You cost us the mission." "I can fix this," Derek said, but he saw the doubt in every face around him. The complaints started that afternoon. Formal reports filed by Torvix and 3 other squad members. All saying the same thing. Fenrik was unpredictable. Dangerous. A liability that put other cadets at risk. Derek spent the evening in the archives, searching through every file he could find about warbeast behavior. Fenrik lay beside him, head resting on his paws, occasionally glancing up at Derek with those amber eyes. "You were just trying to protect me," Derek said softly. "But you have to trust that I can handle myself. We are a team, remember? You have your role, I have mine." Fenrik made a low sound, not quite a whine but close. Derek reached out and scratched behind the warbeast's ear. "We will figure this out. I promise." The next training exercise was scheduled for 2 days later. Another tactical simulation, but this time with live moving targets. Training droids programmed to act as enemies, adding an extra layer of realism to the scenario. Derek worked with Fenrik every spare moment between then and the exercise. Not on commands or formations but on trust. He would place himself in mock danger, let simulated threats get close, showing Fenrik that Derek could defend himself. Slowly the warbeast started to understand. Started to hold back his protective instincts just enough to let Derek fight. The day of the exercise arrived. Derek's squad assembled in the main training arena, a massive space that could be reconfigured into any environment. Today it resembled a destroyed colony, with broken buildings and debris scattered everywhere. "Same rules as before," Torvik said, not looking at Derek. "Stay in formation. Follow the plan. Do not improvise." The exercise began. Training droids emerged from hiding spots, their weapons firing stun rounds that would hurt but not cause permanent damage. The squad moved through the ruins, engaging targets with practiced efficiency. Derek kept one eye on Fenrik at all times. When a droid appeared and fired toward them, he felt the warbeast tense, ready to shield him. But Derek engaged the target himself, taking it down with 2 quick shots. Fenrik held his position, though Derek could sense the effort it took. "Good," Derek whispered. "Trust me." They were halfway through the exercise when something went wrong. A training droid in the upper floor of a ruined building started moving erratically. Its weapon tracking system locked onto a group of cadets huddled behind cover. Instead of firing stun rounds and controlled bursts, the droid's weapon began charging for a full power blast. "Malfunction," someone shouted. The droid's targeting system showed it was aiming at 3 cadets. HFY and 2 others from a different squad. They were pinned down, unable to move without exposing themselves to other training droids still functioning normally. Derek saw it happen in slow motion. The malfunctioning droid's weapon reached full charge. Bright red light poured from its barrel. In seconds it would fire, and at that power level even a training weapon could cause serious injury. "Fenrik, with me?" Derek shouted, already running. The warbeast surged forward, understanding flooding through their bond. They did not need words, did not need commands. They simply moved together with perfect synchronization. Derek ran toward the building's entrance while Fenrik took a different path, circling around to the side. Derek fired at the malfunctioning droid, drawing its attention. The machine's targeting system shifted, tracking the new threat. Fenrik launched himself through a broken window, his massive body crashing into the room where the droid stood. The warbeast's claws tore into the machine's chassis, but it was reinforced, designed to withstand warbeast attacks. Derek reached the stairs and took them 3 at a time. He burst into the room just as the droid's weapon completed its targeting lock on Fenrik. Derek did not hesitate. He threw himself at the machine's exposed back panel, the one weak point in its armor. His fingers found the emergency shutdown switch. He pressed it hard. The droid froze, its weapon powering down with a dying whine. The red charge light faded to black. Fenrik stood over the disabled machine, breathing hard. Derek leaned against the wall, his legs shaking from the adrenaline. Below, the 3 cadets HFY among them emerged from cover. They stared up at the broken window where Fenrik had entered, their expressions stunned. Commander Ninetal's voice came through every cadet's communication device. Exercise terminated. All personnel report to the assembly area immediately. The walk back felt longer than it should have. Derek kept expecting anger, more complaints, maybe even expulsion from the program. Instead, he found the entire academy staff waiting, along with every cadet from his training class. Commander Ninetal stepped forward. What we witnessed today was partnership at its finest. Cadet Foster and Fenrik acted without hesitation to protect their fellow cadets. They demonstrated coordination, bravery, and tactical thinking under pressure. The commander's 4 arms gestured broadly. There is one final test that separates good partnerships from great ones. The gauntlet. Cadet Foster, you and Fenrik have earned your place in it. Derek felt Fenrik press against his side. Around them, cadets who had doubted now watched with something different in their eyes. Respect. Even Ashera nodded slightly, acknowledging what she had seen. The gauntlet awaited. The announcement spread through the academy like wildfire. 20 cadet pairs had qualified for the gauntlet. Only half would pass. The test was legendary, designed by military strategists from a dozen worlds to push war-beast partnerships beyond their limits. Derek stood in the observation deck overlooking the massive gauntlet arena. The space stretched nearly a kilometer in every direction, filled with obstacles, hazards, and automated defense systems. It looked like a nightmare made real. 40% failure rate, a voice said beside him. Derek turned to find Ashera standing there, her silver eyes fixed on the arena below. Some partnerships never recover from the gauntlet. The bond breaks under pressure. Why are you telling me this? Derek asked. She glanced at Fenrik, who sat patiently beside Derek. Because I want to beat you fairly. Not because you went in unprepared. She paused. What you did with the malfunctioning droid was impressive. But the gauntlet is different. It will find every weakness in your partnership and exploit it. Derek nodded slowly. Thanks for the warning. Ashera walked away, her Skyrunner following with fluid grace. Derek watched other teams preparing in the training areas below. Every single one practiced with rigid precision. Commands shouted, formations held, movements synchronized like clockwork. That is not us, is it, boy? Derek said quietly to Fenrik. The warbeast huffed in response, his amber eyes tracking movement in the arena. Derek spent the next 3 days studying Fenrik instead of studying the gauntlet protocols. He watched how the warbeast moved when he was relaxed versus alert. He noted which sounds made Fenrik's ears twitch, which sense drew his attention. He observed everything. On the second day, Derek discovered something interesting. During a routine patrol exercise, Fenrik suddenly stopped and growled at an empty corridor. 2 seconds later, a training droid rolled around the corner. The warbeast had detected it before any scanner registered its presence. Your senses are better than our technology, Derek said, amazement in his voice. You can feel threats before they arrive. That night, Derek pulled up every archive file he could find about pack hunting. Wolves from old Earth. Razorbacks from the colony worlds. Hunting groups that worked together without rigid formations or shouted commands. They succeeded through adaptation and instinct. He found videos of wolf packs taking down prey much larger than themselves. They did not follow a script. They reacted to what their target did, adjusting in real time, trusting each other to fill whatever role was needed in the moment. This is how we train, Derek said to Fenrik, showing him the videos even though he knew the warbeast could not understand them the same way. Not with formations. With trust. The other cadets trained in the simulation chambers, running through mock gauntlet scenarios with mathematical precision. Derek took Fenrik to the outdoor training grounds where the terrain was unpredictable. He would start running in one direction then suddenly change course. Fenrik learned to read Derek's body language, anticipating the shifts before they happened. They practiced in rain, in darkness, in fog created by weather machines. Every condition that might appear in the gauntlet. Torvix found them on the 4th day, working through an obstacle course Derek had built from scrap materials. You should be in the simulators like everyone else, the Kralix cadet said. Learning the gauntlet layout. Memorizing the challenges. We are learning something different, Derek replied, vaulting over a barrier while Fenrik circled around it. You will fail, Torvik said flatly. The gauntlet rewards discipline and preparation. Not whatever this is. Derek paused, breathing hard from the exercise. Maybe. But Fenrik and I do not work like other teams. Trying to force us into their methods will just make us worse. Torvik shook his head and walked away, his thorncrawler following in perfect heel position. That evening, Derek sat in his quarters reviewing tactical data about the gauntlet. Historical records showed the types of challenges that appeared: hostile terrain, mechanical enemies, environmental hazards, resource management, time pressure. What stood out to Derek was how the gauntlet adapted. It was not a static test. The arena's artificial intelligence studied each team and adjusted the difficulty based on their strengths and weaknesses. Teams that relied on formation combat would face scenarios that forced them to split up. Pairs that depended on technology would encounter system failures. It is designed to break rigid thinking, Derek murmured. He looked at Fenrik, who was watching him with patient attention. Which means our flexibility might actually be an advantage. The night before the gauntlet, Derek could not sleep. He went to the enclosure where Fenrik stayed during rest hours. The warbeast was awake too, pacing with nervous energy. Derek let himself in and sat down in the center of the space. Fenrik approached and lay down beside him, resting his massive head in Derek's lap. "You feel it too," Derek said, stroking the soft fur behind Fenrik's ears. "The pressure. Everyone watching. Everyone expecting us to fail." Fenrik made a low rumbling sound. "I need you to know something," Derek continued. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I trust you completely. No matter what the gauntlet throws at us, we face it together. Not as commander and beast. As pack." The warbeast lifted his head and pressed his forehead against Derek's chest, just as he had during the bonding ceremony. Derek felt that connection again, stronger now after weeks of working together. They sat like that for an hour, just being present with each other, building the bond that would need to hold under impossible pressure. Morning came too quickly. Derek joined the other 19 qualifying pairs in the assembly area outside the gauntlet arena. The energy was electric with nerves and excitement. Commander Ninetal addressed them all, his forearms spread wide. "The gauntlet will test everything you have learned. Your skills, your courage, your partnership. Some of you will emerge stronger. Some will not emerge at all." He paused, letting that sink in. "There is no shame in failure here. Only in not trying. The simulation begins in 1 hour. Prepare yourselves." Derek watched the other teams scatter to do last-minute drills and equipment checks. SHRA and her Skyrunner practiced evasive maneuvers with flawless precision. Torvik ran his Thorncrawler through formation changes with mechanical efficiency. Derek did none of that. He simply sat with Fenrik, one hand resting on the warbeast's shoulder, breathing in sync with him. Centering themselves. Becoming one unit instead of two. "Look at them," someone whispered nearby. "The human is just sitting there. Not even preparing. They will be eliminated in the first challenge," another voice agreed. Derek ignored the comments. He closed his eyes and focused on the feeling of Fenrik beside him. The warmth. The steady breathing. The absolute trust flowing between them. When the hour ended and the arena doors opened, Derek stood. Fenrik rose with him, moving in perfect synchronization. They walked toward the entrance together, leaving rigid formations and shouted commands behind them. The gauntlet waited. And they were ready to face it their way. The arena doors sealed behind them with a sound like thunder. Derek's eyes adjusted to the dim light as the gauntlet came to life around him. The floor rumbled and shifted, creating new terrain. Walls rose from hidden compartments. The smell of artificial smoke and ozone filled the air. Beside him, Fenrik's ears swiveled, tracking sounds Derek could not yet hear. The warbeast's body was tense but controlled, waiting for whatever came next. A voice echoed through the arena. Commander Ninetal speaking from the observation deck high above. "The gauntlet begins now. There is no time limit. There is no safe exit until completion. Trust your training. Trust your partner. Begin." The first challenge appeared immediately. The ground beneath Derek's feet turned to mud, thick and clinging. Mechanical enemies emerged from the walls, their weapons tracking targets with cold precision. Derek counted 6 of them, spread across elevated positions. Other teams would stop and plan. Calculate firing angles. Establish defensive positions. Derek did not stop moving. "With me," he said, already running toward the nearest cover. Fenrik surged forward, his powerful legs churning through the mud that would have slowed a human to a crawl. The warbeast's weight actually worked in his favor, his claws finding purchase where boots would have slipped. The mechanical enemies opened fire. Stun rounds cracked through the air. Derek dove behind a concrete barrier while Fenrik circled wide, using the terrain for cover. They had not planned this, had not discussed strategy. They simply moved, each trusting the other to fill the necessary role. Derek popped up and fired 3 quick shots, taking down 1 mechanical enemy. The distraction gave Fenrik the opening he needed. The war beast launched himself at another enemy position, his claws tearing through metal housing. 2 enemies down. The remaining 4 adjusted their tactics, focusing fire on Fenrik. Derek felt his heart jump with worry, but he forced himself to trust. Fenrik was fast, dodging between obstacles with grace that seemed impossible for something his size. Derek flanked right while Fenrik drew attention left. 3 more enemies fell to coordinated strikes. The last one tried to retreat, but Fenrik was already there, ending the threat with surgical precision. The mud drained away. The floor became solid again. Challenge 1 complete. No time to rest. The arena shifted again, walls reconfiguring into a maze of narrow corridors. Derek heard explosions in the distance. Other teams engaging their own challenges. Heat washed over them as flames erupted from vents in the walls. An environmental hazard designed to separate partners. The corridors were too narrow for Fenrik to follow the same path as Derek. Go around, Derek shouted over the roar of flames. Meet me on the other side. Fenrik hesitated for only a second, then turned and disappeared down a different corridor. Derek felt the absence immediately, but he pushed forward. Trust worked both ways. He navigated through the flames, his uniform's heat shielding barely adequate. Sweat poured down his face. The corridor seemed endless, turning back on itself, leading nowhere. Then Derek heard it. Fenrik's howl, distant but clear. Not distress. Direction. The war beast was calling to him, giving him a heading to follow. Derek adjusted his path, following the sound. 2 minutes later he emerged into an open space where Fenrik waited, having found a faster route through the maze. The war beast pressed against him briefly, their reunion wordless but profound. Challenge 2 complete. The gauntlet continued. Obstacle courses that required perfect coordination. Enemy ambushes that tested reaction time. Resource shortages that demanded creative problem solving. Derek lost track of time, lost track of how many challenges they had faced. There was only the next threat, the next obstacle, the next moment of trusting Fenrik with his life. Then everything changed. The arena floor opened up into a massive circular pit. At the center stood something that made Derek's blood run cold. A war mech, 10 meters tall, bristling with weapons and armor plating. But something was wrong with it. Sparks flew from damaged circuits. Its movements were jerky and unpredictable. Corrupted protocol detected, the arena's AI announced. Final challenge initiated. Derek understood immediately. This was the ultimate test. A corrupted war mech with no safety limiters, no programmed restraint. It would fight with lethal intent. Around the pit's edge, Derek could see other teams watching from their own challenge zones. Era was there, her face pale. Torvik stood with his thorncrawler, both looking shocked. The Warmech's targeting system locked onto Derek and Fenrik. Its weapons charged with a sound like gathering thunder. Standard tactics will not work, Derek said, more to himself than Fenrik. The warbeast growled in response, understanding the danger they faced. The mech fired. Derek and Fenrik split apart, the blast scorching the ground between them. The machine was fast, faster than something that size had any right to be. It tracked Fenrik's movement and fired again. Fenrik dodged, but barely. Derek saw the pattern immediately. The mech prioritized the larger threat. It would focus on Fenrik until the warbeast was eliminated. Unless they changed the game. Derek ran directly at the war mech, firing his weapon at its sensor array. The shots did no real damage, but they got the machine's attention. Its targeting system split, trying to track both threats simultaneously. That moment of confusion was all Fenrik needed. The warbeast came in low and fast, going for the mech's leg joints. His claws found gaps in the armor, tearing at hydraulic cables. The mech staggered but did not fall. It swept one massive arm in a backhand that would have crushed Fenrik if it connected. But Derek was already there, firing at the arm's servos. The limb's movement slowed just enough for Fenrik to duck under. They fell into a rhythm. Derek creating openings. Fenrik exploiting them. Neither leading. Neither following. Just 2 parts of the same hunting pack bringing down prey that should have been impossible to defeat. The war mech adapted, learning their pattern. It fired a spread of shots that forced Derek and Fenrik back toward the pit's edge. Nowhere left to dodge. The machine charged its main weapon for a finishing blast. Derek looked at Fenrik. The warbeast looked back. In that instant no words were needed. They both understood what had to be done. They charged forward together directly at the mech. The machine's weapon reached full charge, but they were already inside its optimal firing range. Fenrik leaped high, his massive weight crashing into the mech's chest. The impact staggered the machine backward. Derek slid between its legs, his hands finding the emergency maintenance panel he had spotted earlier. He ripped it open and jammed his weapon inside, firing directly into the mech's power core. The machine froze. Sparks erupted from every joint. It toppled backward like a fallen tree, crashing to the arena floor with a sound that shook the entire structure. Silence fell over the gauntlet. Derek lay on his back, gasping for air. Fenrik limped over and collapsed beside him, both of them utterly spent. Challenge complete, the arena's AI announced. Team Derek, Foster and Fenrik. Time to completion, fastest on record. The observation deck erupted in noise. Cheering, shouting, disbelief. Derek could barely process it. They had done it. Actually done it. Commander Ninetal's voice cut through the chaos. All teams exit the arena. The gauntlet is concluded. The graduation ceremony 3 days later felt surreal. Derek stood in dress uniform, Fenrik groomed and wearing the ceremonial harness reserved for bonded warbeasts. Around them, the other successful teams waited for their names to be called. Shra and her Skyrunner received honors for tactical excellence. Torvix and his Thorncrawler for defensive mastery. Each team was recognized for their strengths. Then Commander Ninetal called Derek and Fenrik forward. This partnership defied every expectation. They succeeded not through rigid discipline but through absolute trust. They proved that sometimes the greatest strength comes from breaking the rules everyone thought were unbreakable. The commander placed medals around both Derek's neck and Fenrik's. I present the Academy's top team. May their service bring honor to all worlds. The applause was deafening. Derek looked down at Fenrik, who sat proud and tall beside him. No longer the aggressive alpha that nobody wanted. Now a legend in his own right. Their first assignment orders arrived that evening. A frontier post where human-alien cooperation was still new and uncertain. The perfect place for a team that specialized in doing the impossible. Derek packed his gear while Fenrik watched from the doorway. Ready for the real thing? Derek asked. Fenrik's tail moved in what Derek now recognized as anticipation. They had proven themselves in the Academy. Now it was time to prove themselves in the galaxy beyond. Together, as they had always been meant to be.